Are we still calling this Superman? We're just calling the show Lois and Them. It's your boy Icon with a DC TV review for you, going over episode 3 of Superman and Lois, the final season. Always my hero. And before we get started, hit that notification bell, like it, or subscribe, and let's get started. So, in this particular episode, it actually starts with a funeral. Lois and the boys, they got their black on, and they're about to have a funeral. And it's assumed, especially because of the name of the title, that it's referring to Clark because, or Superman, either or, because like he's dead and they need to tell the world. Lois also ended up publishing the article that says like a world without Superman, like Superman's gone. So now they're basically getting the word out to let everybody know that Superman's gone. And while they're doing that, the general, it takes us back to the general, like the DOE. The general is basically trying to figure out a way to combat the doomsday that Lex Luthor has. And he spoke to one of his other generals. Like, it was one of the women, I forgot her name, but she was in like previous seasons. He was talking about bringing in the Irons family. So here come the black people. He was talking about bringing in the Irons family. But he also asked that other general if they still had that vial that Bruno Mannheim was using to try to save his wife, like the serum. And because the serum had Superman blood in it. And then she said that she had one vial left. So he told her, he was like, yo, give me the vial. And then I'm going to go talk to the Irons family. But she was just like, oh, but I don't trust that you'll do the right thing. He was like, trust me. He's like, I got a plan and it'll definitely work. So he takes the vial and then he goes holler at the Irons. So now I said the black people is back. So John Henry Irons is here. Natalie's here. And they were asked to join the DOE, like full time. And they had a decision to make about whether or not they should do it. Of course, they said yes, because they both were just like, they didn't get a chance to fight for their world. So now they're going to fight for this one with the people that they love, so they can save this particular planet. Love the Irons family. And like, they're always such a breath of fresh air, like in this show. I swear, like if the Arrowverse wasn't ending, like the Irons family could have got their own show. So like they're at the DOD now, they're with the general, and now they're all working together and trying to figure some stuff out. But that female general, she did go up to the Irons family and she told them to keep an eye on Lang because she didn't really trust what he was going to do with that vial. So then now we're back at the Kent farm. And the Kent's like, they're talking to Lois. Like, the boys are talking to Lois about the article. And then she's just like, like, it's time. Like, everybody should know that Superman won't be there to protect them. And then Jonathan gets mad and he goes, well, Superman would have been there to protect us if it wasn't for Jordan's dumbass getting his heart crushed. And then, Jonathan got mad and stormed out. And then, Lois was like, oh, he doesn't mean that. And she was like, yeah, he means that. Which he did. So then Jonathan goes into the barn and he goes downstairs to where his father's rocket ship was that brought him here when he was a baby. He touched it. He actually had his hands on it. And when he touched it, Jordan came downstairs to talk to him, and Jonathan tried to tell him, he was like, look, now's not a good time. But then Jordan kept forcing the issue. He was like, come on, bro, talk to me. And then he was like, you want me to talk? And then he basically got in that ass. He was just like, he said that I'm sick of you for the last 4 years. You've been bitching and moaning and complaining about how hard everything is. You have superpowers and you're bitching about that. You were dating Sarah and you bitched about that. He's like, and now because of your stupidness and because of your idiocy to try to like prove something and to prove everybody that you're not a fucking moron, he's like, now my dad is dead and there's nothing that I can do about it. He got so emotionally enraged. You just heard somebody go clear, and then all of a sudden that kick-started his powers, and now Jonathan Kent has superpowers because his eyes started lighting up. He started seeing like the X-ray vision and everything. The cold breath came out, and I was actually happy for him. I was happy that he got powers because there needs to be one child that has powers that knows what the hell they're doing. So, but here's the funny thing is, it wasn't like Jordan where the powers like slowly came in and he was getting like one power a week. All of his powers kicked in at the exact same time. And when they kicked in, Jonathan knew how to use them. Like, he knew how to fly. He knew the freeze breath. He knew how to use the superhero. He knew how to use the super breath. And that started making Jordan feel some kind of way because they were just like, oh, the child that everybody wanted to have superpowers finally has them. So you all get what you wanted from the beginning. Now he's acting like a bitch. Lois was just like, oh, honey, she's like, I love you both and blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, but your favorite child has superpowers. And then the general was basically talking about bringing Jonathan into the DOE to train him because although he does know how to use his power, he doesn't have training. But Jonathan is actually the smart Kent because unlike his brother, he accepted the help from the DOD and he didn't just go running in blind like a dumbass. So then Jonathan and Lois, they go to the DOE so he can get his training. The Irons family is also at the DOD, so they can, be prepared to fight Doomsday. And then that just left Jordan at home by himself sitting in the barn. And then Lex rolls up on him. Lex Luthor shows up, and just like I said in the last episode, he played the tape of Lois choosing which son she wanted to live. Because when she was faced with that decision of which child to pick, we never found out which one she actually picked. They showed us here because he played the tape for Jordan, and then after they were just like, oh, if you want to save Jonathan, press 1. If you want to save Jordan, press 2. And then when she pushed 1, and then it goes, oh, you have saved Jonathan. Thank you for letting us know. No, they said thank you for telling the truth for once and letting us know what your favorite child is. And then that's when Lex tried to get into his head because he was just like, oh, all your power and all your super stuff. And it's like, your mother still doesn't love you. And she still loves your brother better. And I'm just like, here we go. Because his dumb ass is going to fall for this the same way he always does. So he gets all emotionally riled up. He goes down to the DOE and he's like, Mom, did you choose Jonathan over me? And thank God, Lois said exactly, go back to my episode 2 review. Lois said the exact thing I said she would say. And then when he was just like, oh, the tape says that you chose Jonathan and you didn't pick me, Lois said, yes, I picked Jonathan because he doesn't have superpowers. And then Jordan was like, oh, but Jonathan wasn't even in danger. And she was like, I didn't know that. He just told me both of my kids are in danger and I can only save one of them. So I chose to save the one who did not have superpowers. I'm like, it's not that hard. Then he got all mad. He's like, oh, nobody loves me. And then he ran off like a bitch. God, I hate Jordan. Like, Jordan is Sarah for me, like, for this season. So he's home crying his eyes out. Everybody's at the DOE. Lex had ended up flipping one of the dudes in the DOE, and he went in the general's office and put a gun to his head and had Lex via video phone. And then Lex basically told him, because they said that the general is the only person that knows where Lex's daughter is. So now this is all about trying to find Lex's daughter. And then he was like, tell me where my daughter is, or I'm going to send my creature down there to kill you and everybody at the DOE. And then, after that, then the general ended up fighting the soldier that had him at gunpoint. The gun accidentally went off and it shot the general in the gut. And now he's on the floor and he's like bleeding out. And then after that, I guess Lex was like, fuck it, send the monster. So he sends Doomsday down there, and that called in the Irons family. So Natalie put the suit on. Natalie looks good with the suit on. And she looks taller for some reason. Natalie put the suit on. John Harry Irons put the suit on. The two of them flew up into the atmosphere to try to intercept Doomsday as Doomsday was like flying towards them. And they, I didn't see the hammer like that. Like, I didn't notice the hammer, but they fired like I don't know if those were nuclear rockets or whatever the case would be, but they fired missiles, at Doomsday, and it didn't work. And Doomsday basically knocked both of them into next Thursday. But before they went and fought him, the general stopped both of them. And he said, listen, I need you to do me a favor, because right after he got shot, the serum, the Bruno Mannheim serum, he took the serum and injected himself with it. And when I did that, I was like, if this was Marvel, this would be Red Hulk territory, because everybody thought, especially the female general, everybody thought he was going to try to use that serum to create a monster that can counteract Doomsday. That's what everybody was assuming. And then when he took the injection himself, then everybody assumed he was trying to turn himself into a monster so he can counteract Doomsday. That wasn't what his plan was. So anyway, so now that the Irons family is flying through space and time, like Doomsday shows up, and then he's just like, if Lang doesn't come out and tell me where, my daughter is, I'm going to murder you all. And at that point, like, Jonathan is outside, Lois is outside, and I'm glad Jonathan didn't reveal that he had power to Lex Luthor. Like, I like the fact that that's still a secret. But then the general, he did come outside, and then he walked up to Doomsday, and he told Lex Luthor, he said, under no circumstances will I ever tell you where your daughter is. He's like, I made your daughter a promise, and I intend to honor that promise. And unlike my grandson, Jordan, I ain't no bitch, so I'm not going to tell you the information. And then Lex got mad, and he was like, screw it. He told Doomsday to kill him. Doomsday picked up the general, snapped his neck, killed him. Lois was screaming and crying her eyes out. Jonathan went crazy. Jordan doesn't know what's happening because he's home crying like a bitch. And the general is now dead, unfortunately. Because I did hear that the general was only going to be in for 2 episodes, so I thought it was going to be the first two, but it was like the first and the third. And also throughout the entire season, throughout the entire episode, because Clark isn't here, because he's like dead or whatever the case may be, and I said this in the last episode, they're basically paying Tyler Hoechlin to do flashbacks, like, and because that's going to be his contribution while he's currently not around. So this particular set of flashbacks, it was based around General Lang, and it tells us about the day when Lois and Clark told the general that he was Superman. He didn't believe him at first, obviously, but once he found out, like, Clark later then went to the general and he said, "Listen, I want to marry your daughter and I want your blessing." And he was like, "No." He said, "You're Superman, for Christ's sake." He said, "People are after you, and he's like, "I don't want you to put my daughter in that kind of danger." But he was like, "Oh, but I love your daughter," and blah blah blah. He was like, "I don't give a shit." So, and he was just like, "Look, I'm asking for your blessing, but technically I don't need it." And then he was just like, "Well, do what you got to do, son." And that's sort of like a rift between them. So now the two of them decided to get married anyway. Mama Kent, she showed up again, so nice to see Mama Kent. They had their wedding at the barn, like they said, because they did bring that up throughout this, throughout the series, that they did get married at the Smallville barn. And while they were at the barn, the general was also there because he wasn't going to miss his daughter's wedding. And then that's when he kind of like felt bad. He talked to Lois. They got things squared out. Lois, told him that she was like, "Clark and I are in this for the long haul." He gave Lois his blessing, walked his daughter down the aisle, and then they got married. And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, they are putting a lot of respect like on the general's name. And anytime a character gets that much recognition and that much shine and that much burn, they're not going to make it. Interesting, though, when the Irons family was brought to the DOE, the general introduced them to everyone else as Steel and Starlight. So that's cool. But now, and they're like Starlight miles away the way Doomsday knocked him down. But now the general's dead. That concludes the flashbacks. But then after the general died and then Doomsday left, the Irons family came back. And then that's when John was just like, "Everybody go inside," because the coming trailers, like next week on Superman and Lois, they made it seem like John Henry was going to die, but thankfully he didn't. But then he told everybody, he said, "Listen," he said, "the general had a plan and I need to get him out of here right now so his plan can take effect." He said, "I need you to trust me and Natalie will fill you all in." And then John Henry Irons picked up the general's body and flew him away. And then he crashed into the Fortress of Solitude. And I didn't even know John Henry Irons knew where that shit was. And then he ran up on Mama L. And then she was like, "Oh, John Henry Irons, it's you." And then he said, "Yeah." He's like, "I need you to use the general's heart to save Clark." And then she was like, "Oh, it's not going to work." And he was like, "Of course it's going to work, because the general infused himself with a serum that has Clark's blood in it. And now that serum is pumping through the heart of the general. The general wants you to take his heart out and give it to Clark, because he already died." So, and then, so she was just like, "Oh, we'll see. I'll see what we can do. Let's prep the transfer." And then she ended up taking the general's heart out of his body and she attached it to Clark. So then John asked her, he was like, "How long is that going to take?" And then she said, "Well, if everything goes well, it's not a question of performing the surgery, but it's a question of whether or not Clark is going to adapt to the heart and whether or not the heart is going to accept Clark." So now we're playing the waiting game. Natalie was telling the boys back home everything that happened. They told Jordan what happened. He started crying. And then, Natalie said that this was the general's plan all along. They said that he was looking for a donor to give the serum to do the heart transplant. But after he got shot and he knew that Doomsday was coming to kill him, he was like, "Fuck it, I might as well just use it on myself." So I said, so he used it on himself. So, they knew the plan. And then Natalie had pulled out one of those holographic things where the general had left a message for Lois before he died. The usual, like, "I love you, pumpkin," like, "you made me a father and a better man," and blah, blah, blah. What was fucked up about that whole thing, he gave like a whole speech telling Lois how much he loved her, he'll miss her and how much she means everything to him. He didn't mention Lucy not once during that entire hologram. And I was like, damn, that's fucked up. It's like, if you're Lucy and they played that hologram for Lucy and she's kind of like, "Yo, where am I?" That's how problems start. Like, I hope they never show Lucy that like that video and that information. And so then that was that. And then, John Henry Irons came back and, everybody's trying to say goodbye to the general. We later find out, because again, the episode started with a funeral. The funeral wasn't for Clark. It wasn't for Superman. The funeral in the beginning of the episode was for the general. It was for him because he's the one who died. Well, they didn't bury him because he's a general, so they had to bury him in some cool, army, cemetery or whatever, but they had a plaque for him, and they had a funeral for him at the Kent farm. And Lois basically like said their piece, everybody said their goodbyes, and all of them were just standing there, like paying respects to the general, paying respects, like to his grave. So we lost a character, we lost another character, like on the show, which is sad, but it's the final season, so people aren't going to make it. The general's gone, and then Lex is still trying to find his daughter. That's still on the table. And then at the very, very, very end, we go back to the Fortress of Solitude. The cameras zoom in to the crystal matrix tub that Clark was in, and then right before the episode ended, Clark's eyes opened and he woke up. That was how the episode ended. And thank you for tuning in. So this was dope. Like, this was a very good episode. This was a very good episode. This episode made me it was very emotional. As I said, it sucks that we actually had to lose the general because, like I said, I loved him as a character. But that's how these things work, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, we'll see if anybody else dies before the series is over. But now, and it's also cool because now, although he's gone, his heart is pumping, lives within Clark. So, like Grandpa's always with us, no matter what. And he said goodbye to Natalie. He said goodbye to Natalie. He said goodbye to the boys. He said goodbye to everybody but Lucy. I'm like, that's fucked up. Like I said, but thank you for tuning in. Share your questions, comments, and concerns down below, and let's continue to talk about it. Check me out on TikTok. Check me out on X, on Twitter, and Instagram, where you can leave your questions, comments, and concerns, because I got a lot of good stuff coming up on the channel. New York Comic-Con is this week. Today's Monday. New York Comic-Con is this Thursday, so we will be going to New York Comic-Con, so look out for my Comic-Con footage. Check out my videos for Agatha all along for you Marvel fans. For you HBO, DC fans, I got the Penguin up on my channel. And for you Netflix fans and you video game fans, I got Tomb Raider, Lara Croft up on the channel. And then we're still concluding the final season of Superman and Lois. So that was it, guys. So thanks for tuning in. Signing off for now. But up and away as always as we say goodbye to the General. Until then, we're out this. Bye!